I got this one upon request from one of our community members here who is asking about what's the difference between tempo pace, marathon pace, threshold pace, and if I can make a video about it. I'm like the radio station. You call in with your request and I'll hit you with the video. So today I'm going to dive into the differences between tempo and threshold running. I'll end the video giving you some workout ideas for these two building blocks of training, and I'll also go over the physiological benefits of both of these styles of running. Now, my goal with this video and with this entire training series is to explain these principles as simple as possible using the simplest language as possible. So let me know in the comments if anything is unclear. There's so much science out there, there's so much great content out there, and there's so much meaning behind why we run these workouts, and I really want to make sure that everyone out there can get the great benefits behind these styles of runs. Before we get into it, I want to tell you guys about a cool tool that I built. If you haven't checked it out yet, go to runningshoematcher.com. I built a tool that matches you with the best running shoe for you based on your answers to just 5 questions. So you go in there, you put in your goal race, you put in your preferences for shoes, whether you like them soft or firm, whether you need stability or not, whether you're looking for a daily trainer, a tempo shoe, or a race day shoe, and we'll match you with the best shoe for you. So go ahead and go to runningshoematcher.com and check that out. All right, let's get into it. All right, so first up, let's dive into tempo workouts. Now, tempo workouts are what cause the most confusion when we're thinking about tempo versus threshold runs, because there is no scientific definition behind tempo. Now, it will depend on what plan you're using, what training style you're following, and what that coach subscribes to when we're thinking about what the tempo workout is. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to explain what the Hansen's method says about it, because that's the style that I use, and I also think it's the easiest to follow, most straightforward. And I'll also give you some variations and what the different definition is from Jack Daniels, which is where some of this confusion comes from. So simply put, in the Hansen's method of marathon training, a tempo run is a run that's done at marathon pace. And the way that I can remember this and differentiate it from threshold is marathon pace is commonly referenced as MP. If you think about the way tempo is spelled, T-E-M-P-O, there's MP right in there. So that's a good shortcut and way to remember tempo if you need to. So the purpose of tempo runs is to practice running at race pace. If we're training for marathons, there's a bulk of mileage that's done at that really easy running pace that's going to be slower than your race pace. There's some faster workouts to stress those anaerobic systems, that VO2 max, and promote running economy. And then right in the middle is your race pace. So you'll have some workouts that are faster, you'll have some runs that are slower, then you'll have those tempo runs which are done at goal race pace. So these tempo runs improve endurance, they have similar benefits as those aerobic base building runs, and they'll help improve your running economy at your race pace. So when people say improve running economy, what that means is it takes less effort, less energy, fewer calories to run at the same pace. So if you ran a 6:30 pace and you burned 500 calories and your heart rate was 180, and then 3 months later you ran that same 6:30 pace, your heart rate was at 160 and you burned 300 calories, your running economy is improving because you're running that same pace but getting more efficient. Another benefit of tempo runs, specifically if you're training for the marathon, is it's a great time to practice your race day strategy. So if you have a tempo run on the schedule and you're not sure what shoes you're going to wear yet for that race day, that's a really great chance to bring out your Alpha Flies, your Vapor Flies, your Saucony Endorphin Pro 3s, put them on, see how they feel at race pace, see how the turnover is with them, have your body adjust to whatever small mechanical changes you might need to make to run in those shoes. Also a great time to practice nutrition strategy. So if you haven't had a ton of experience taking gels or taking in liquids on the run, then the tempo runs as well as your long runs are a great chance to practice that fueling. And finally, it's a good chance to practice your pacing strategy. So while these tempo runs typically are prescribed to be run at a steady state pace, so run at the same pace. If you have a tempo run at 7 minutes per mile, you should probably try to hold around that 7 minutes per mile. It's also a good chance to practice your marathon race pace strategy. So maybe try a negative split in there where you get a little bit faster towards the end of that run. Maybe run the first 2 miles of that run at a 7:05, and then the last few miles at a 6:55 to practice that gradual progression that you would need to do on race day to hit your PR. Another reason I love tempo running, and a huge benefit of it for me, is that it's a chance to have higher turnover. It's a chance to run a bit faster than that aerobic base building pace without the higher injury risk of faster running. So the one time in my running career where I did get an injury, it was from an interval style workout where I pushed really hard and without properly warming up, coming off of rate, it was bad altogether. But there's a lot lower chance of injury for me specifically when I'm running at that marathon pace than when I'm running 10K pace or faster. So promote higher turnover with lower injury risk. And last, tempo runs are going to improve your overall endurance. Again, similar to those aerobic base building runs, this is a chance for you to get better at running faster, running longer, and the tempo run or that marathon pace run gonna improve your overall fitness. All right, guys, I'm gonna end by reading you a passage from Hansen's because I think this sums up why tempo runs are so great and what they're really teaching you to do when you execute them properly. So tempo runs teach an important skill, control. Even when the pace feels easy, tempo workouts train you to hold back and maintain. So again, this is a great chance to practice that pacing, to practice what you're going to need to do on race day if you're approaching that marathon to not go out too hot. And if you're not training for a marathon, these tempo workouts are still a great chance for you to practice restraint, because with that tempo workout that's run at marathon pace, you can run it a whole bunch faster. You can probably progress it to 10K pace, 5K pace at the end if you wanted to, but it's a great chance to practice being a bit more conservative because that's the strategy that's gonna get you that big PR on your next race. So now let's get into threshold running. Now there are two different types of threshold. There's the anaerobic threshold and the aerobic threshold, but for the purposes of this video, we are going to dive into the anaerobic threshold in depth because that's what most coaches and athletes reference when they're talking about threshold. So your anaerobic threshold is the pace you can hold for about 1 hour in a race. Some coaches also say this is the pace you could hold for about 30 minutes in training. So for the elite of the elite, threshold pace would be about half marathon pace. For newer runners, this might be about 10K pace. And for us intermediate recreational runners, if you're running 10Ks between 35 to 50 minutes, it's gonna be about your 15K race pace or somewhere between your 10K and your half marathon race pace. Side note, if you haven't ever run a 15K race, I highly recommend you to go check out one in your area. They're my favorite race distance. That's actually where I have the PR that I'm the most proud of. So 15K is about 9.3 miles, I believe. It's really a good distance to gauge your fitness, and especially if you're gonna start training for a half marathon or marathon, it's a really good chance for you to test your endurance and to see where your threshold is. So one way you can calculate this threshold pace is to use an online calculator. So I'll link to that V.02 calculator, that popular one from Jack Daniels, where you can put in your race pace and it spits out your training paces. For that, you should have a recent race or time trial that you can plug into it to get the most accurate results. Now, the benefit of a threshold run is that it improves your body's ability to clear lactate. Now, when you feel your legs getting heavy and needing to slow down, that is lactic acid accumulating in your legs. Now, Jack Daniels talks about this in a really approachable, simple way. So I'm gonna read a passage from the Daniels Marathon Training book where he introduces the key principle of threshold running. So Daniel says, the all-important purpose of threshold runs is to allow your body to improve its ability to clear blood lactate and keep it below a fairly manageable level. So again, this is me now. When we get that lactate up above that manageable level, that's when we need to slow down. That's why if you've ever run a hard half marathon and you've slowed down significantly in the back half, you probably pushed it past your lactate threshold in the first half. All right, back to Daniels. He says, just as easy and marathon runs improve your ability to press on mentally at a comfortable pace, threshold runs improve your speed you can keep up for a moderately prolonged time period. So these threshold runs are comfortably hard. They are not a walk in the park by any means, and you're going to push yourself when you approach this style of running. So threshold pace is usually at about 85 to 88% of VO2 max for really well-trained runners, or 80 to 86% of VO2 max and max heart rate for less trained runners. So for me, my lactate threshold pace is at about 175 to 180. I haven't really done an all-out effort recently, but last year is at about 179 to 180 heart rate. So again, a good way to do this is to do a 15K race, to do a 10K race or a half marathon, and plug those into a calculator to get that target pace. All right, guys, now I want to end with giving you a few tempo style workouts and a few threshold style workouts that you can implement into your training. So tempo workouts, these are the workouts where we hold one pace for a longer period of time. My favorite style of tempo workouts are progressions. So for thinking this being at about marathon pace, I would do a progression where I start about 5 to 10 seconds above marathon pace and then gradually increase it into 10 seconds below marathon pace, or even getting into that half marathon pace range. Now for this style of workout, you do want to be pretty conservative in the beginning and not progress it too hard in the end, because again, the purpose of this style of run is to get comfortable running at that marathon pace. So if you go too fast, you're going to defeat the purpose. Another great tempo workout is to do 4 to 10 miles of marathon race pace inside of your long run. So for example, I've been doing these 16-mile long runs, and for my last one, I did a 3-mile warm-up, 3-mile cool down, and then eat 10-mile tempo within that run. I also love doing that because it breaks up the long run a bit more. 16 miles at just an aerobic, easy pace is kind of mind-numbing, especially because I've been doing it at the treadmill here when I'm at Duke, and that is not the most fun. Last one here is just a steady state tempo. Go out and run 4 to 10 miles at marathon pace, depending on where you are in your training. You might want to warm up a little bit before you get into this. I like this style of run where I just go out and start running marathon pace, because that's what you're going to have to do on race day. When you're running the marathon, you're not going to have a huge warm up beforehand, because that's going to start depleting your glycogen stores and getting you fatigued. So just going out and running tempo or running marathon pace is going to get you used to what it feels like to run like that on race day. Alright guys, now let's dive into the threshold workout. So I just did a really fun one this morning, fun and challenging and painful, that I got from Philly Bowden. She did a really awesome half marathon workout video, and this was one of them. So I did 5 by 1 miles at threshold with a half-mile float pace in between. So for me, I ran those 1 miles at 5:52, and then by the end I progressed that to around 5:40 pace. Then I ran that float at about 10 to 15 seconds slower than marathon pace. So for me, that was 6:50. This was a pretty fun one because I usually do workouts where I do more recovery pace in between. So 8-minute, 8:30-minute pace, which is not very challenging for me, allows my heart rate to come down into the 130s or 140s. This one kept my heart rate elevated the entire time. I wasn't really checking my heart rate during it because I was trying to stay locked in. But if I had to guess, it only really came down to that 150 range. So a bit more challenging. I wasn't able to recover as much. So it pushed my fitness and it pushed me mentally to be able to lock in and execute like that. So a variation on that I got from Jack Daniels is you could do 5 by 6 minutes with a 1-minute rest. So if your threshold pace is slower than 6 minutes per mile, then this is a good workout for you, because you're not going to be holding these super long working periods, but would be very similar to what I did this morning. And then you could take a 1-minute walking or jogging rest. I really prefer to do light recovery jogs in my workouts and not walking, just because on race day you're hopefully not going to be walking, so it gets your body accustomed to staying in that aerobic zone for the entirety of the workout. So another one would be 3 by 12 minutes at threshold pace with 2-minute rest. So very similar to those first two, except longer working periods and fewer intervals. So you're spending more time at that pace, getting more fatigued by the end of the pace, and then getting 2 minutes of rest in between. Then finally here would be a 20-minute threshold workout. So this is going to be really challenging. You got to be locked in. It's almost like pushing it to a 5K, 10K effort. Definitely want to make sure you're getting a good warm-up in before this one, because that threshold pace can be pretty tough on your body. So you want to make sure all your joints, all your muscles are warmed up. I like to do a 2 to 3 mile warm-up before all my workouts to make sure I'm locked in and ready to go. All right guys, so there you have it. Those are the differences between tempo and threshold, and some workouts for you all. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for liking and subscribing, and I'll make sure to keep you up to date on the latest and greatest in the world of performance running.